Welcome to the Jagzntech YouTube channel. This is second video in the XJ6 restoration, where we're putting a 1996 supercharged 4-litre engine from a 1996 car into the 1978 car. There's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. One is give you a brief overview of how to follow the circuit diagram. So for those of you not interested in that side of it, please jump forward. I'll put up here how many minutes to jump forward to, and then talk about the display. Obviously, there's things like speedos, rev counters, etc. All those kinds of good things that we need. I want to use the module that provides a display to give me a milometer. The alternative is I'm going to have to go and find some kind of GPS-based thing. But like I say, I want to use what I've got rather than buy other things. The other point to mention is in the previous video, I was a little confused where I didn't need to put my foot on the brake to actually crank the car. And that's basically because, I haven't driven this car for 30 plus years. I didn't drive the X300. I fixed it where I was buying it from. I got it running, but with a alternator that was seized, I towed it home with an A-frame, so I wasn't actually in control of it at all. And then, so in the XF, which is my daily driver, my wife's XF is the nearest I've got to driving this car. You do have to press your foot on the brake to press the start button for it to actually work. It won't do anything unless you put your foot on the brake. And obviously, in the X300 in Series 2, you don't have to do that. You do need to press your foot on the brake to change the gears, as we've shown, but not to actually crank it. So just get rid of that piece of confusion. So without further ado, let's get into the circuit diagrams. Here's the electrical guide that comes with the 95, 96 onwards car X300 model, which the supercharged engine comes from. Obviously, previously discussed, I'm merging the electronics out of the XJ6 from 1996 into the XJ6 from 1978, and obviously the electronics inside are totally different. There's lots of electronic control modules, etc., that I've put in, and tried to use the wiring and sockets, etc., relays, etc., from the 1996 car. So yeah, it does mean that you need to understand some of this stuff that's in this manual. So I thought, first off, I'll give you just a couple of minute overview of how to follow things in these manuals. Hopefully it'll it'll help you with other manuals, etc. So there's bits of stuff at the front, but the main thing we're interested in is the diagrams around the various different options. Obviously, we've got AJ16 supercharged engine management is what we're interested in. So let's whiz through all this stuff at the beginning. Yeah. I think we probably want to go. Let's grab the side here and jump down much quicker. Oh, that's not what we want to do. So there's details around the modules and the pins and the color of those pins. So we definitely need to know about that stuff. Let's keep going. So this one here shows you where the devices in the X300 car actually reside. Now, obviously, I don't have hardly any of that, but most of it I've either reused or repurposed or whatever. So this is a very sort of you've got the first part of it. You've got the battery, some big fuses, and some fuse boxes. Now I've used 2 fuse boxes, and the main points here are you can see it's got some a square box with a number in it that's telling you where the connection actually came from. So N is actually brown, so we've got a brown wire coming in here providing 12 volts directly from the battery, so that's a permanent feed. And you've got a relay here which is enabled and then connects the fuses in that fuse box, and the same for various different others. These numbers, as you can see, start off quite low, 1, 2, 3, and as you go through the manual, those numbers increase. The other point, if you've got a box like this with a number in it, and that one underneath, just above my hand there, the mouse hand, that one means switch 1, ignition switch position 1, and this is position 2, etc. And so certain, for example, this has got like a permanent feed to this fuse box, but what enables that is position 2. So when you get to position 2 on the switch, that will energize this relay, and then all the fuses in that fuse box will be enabled. Now they're no longer trunk, etc. I've just got one in the engine bay on the left-hand side, and I've got another one in the front footwell left-hand side, sort of like inside the wing or the fender, you call them in the US. So that's where mine are, and I've modified them. So if it continued down, you can see the numbers are slowly increasing. So if you're on page 150, and well, let's do that. Look, if we go, so this is page 31. So if we go to page 150, there's nothing there. So here's telling me, look, actually number 7's here, number 59. So if we say, okay, this number 59 actually says it's B plus. So if we go back to 31, so what was it? 50 we were looking for. So here you go. It's here. So it's actually, and the other point to note here, see this where it says 10.1? That is actually the figure number here. So you can go and find it that way. And if you've got more than one, so this is 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.7, and 9.8, you'll find that will be maybe the V12 and the V12 rest of the world, and that'll be the supercharged car, and that may be Canada or something. So those are just slightly different versions of the same circuit to fit the country or the model that it's used for. So obviously you don't have to have 10 manuals or 5 manuals in this case for 5 different modules. So yeah, so effectively this is where the power is coming from. This is where you can go and look on those pages to see what it's actually for, and so you can, therefore you can go backwards and forwards and work out, which fuse does what, which power does what. There is, 1 and 2 here, showing you about the switches. So that's not much help. So like this is the V12 rest of world engine management part 1. So that's 4.6. A couple of pages on. Oh, that's not actually helpful. Here you go. So here's the battery starter generator for the 4-litre normally aspirated automatic, and that's figure 3.1. If we scroll forward a bit more, 3.2 is the 4-litre supercharged and 3.2-litre automatic. So this is actually the one for the for the car that the engine and gearbox and the electronics came from. So as I mentioned previously, on the X300 car, you have an ignition switch, which is effectively connecting those pins to ground. So ground down here, the common connector within the switch is ground, and you're effectively making those points ground, in positions 1, 2, and 3. Now, the Series 2 steering lock and key doesn't do that. It works differently, and so does all the other electronics in the car. There's still the lighting, the horns, etc. That's still in use. The indicator, all of that stuff is still the original Series 2. It's only really the engine and gearbox management that's been upgraded. So in effect, what we need to do is we have to put a relay in these lines coming out of the switch on the Series 2 car to convert them from positive, which is what this is connected to the battery, uh, on the Series 2 car, and so when you close the switch, it makes this point live, and obviously this is expected, the engine, the body processor module here is expecting that to be a ground signal. So we effectively have to have a relay in line with all of these um, to switch the signal to ground. So what I've done is I've used the original metal can relay that's on the firewall, um, and just used it to switch. When you enable that relay, you're actually connecting this point to ground. You're taking this point to ground. So then the body processor module receives a crank signal in the right state, i.e. ground. That comes out of here, assuming all the other bits are in place. Now this is the park and neutral position that, again, in the previous video, that linear gear position switch wasn't in the right place. I've adjusted it. I'll show you that in the video shortly. And again, that provides a ground signal to the body processor module. Assuming that security and locking control module has the right signals, some of which are from the key position, the exciter coil. There should be a switch that says the key is in the lock. Now, obviously, I've just grounded that out, so set that to be always in. And so there is still this fueling inhibit signal as well. So we need to make sure that the various different signals are being sent between the engine control module, security locking module. Now that's encoded pulses, it's a data stream. I'm not going to get into trying to show you that. But effectively what we need to know is this. Sorry, one thing I have overlooked is, like, in these triangles, if it's an I in a triangle, that's an input, an O is an output, and D is data input. So you can see whether or not, what kind of signal is going down these particular paths. So assuming that we're getting secure status is armed or disarmed, so you've effectively got the security and locking module saying, yep, everything's good to go. There's a check engine signal as well. You can see here, if we go off to page 11.2 or figure 11.2, we can see where that comes from. But effectively, we need the ground signal coming in here to crank. We need to be park and neutral for it to crank. We've proved that in the previous video. We need a check engine signal, whatever that's probably low as well. Quite often it tells you what it should be in the previous. So check engine should be ground when it's active, be positive when it's negative. So you get all of that information here as well. So assuming we've got all of those signals in the right state, when you turn this key, the previous little CAN relay on the firewall will enable a negative or a ground signal to be fed in here. So that signal will come out. This wiring, the wiring loom that I've used is the original. It goes all the way down here, comes back into the starter relay. The starter relay is wired exactly the same. I didn't change any of that. And assuming it's got power here, and it's also got power from 31 key position 2, that will enable the starter motor to go. So quite a few little bits and pieces to go and check and prove that are working. Some of them you can work out, well, if I'm doing this and the starter motor is going, then obviously all those other things are in place. So that's pretty much a quick intro into the circuit diagram, how to read it. Hopefully that's of use to some of you. Yeah, here's a description: input, output, serial encoded communications, and if there's nothing in it, it's ground. So yeah, those kind of things. And it actually also here tells you that if you want 1 to 6, it's figure 1 to 1.1. 7 to 75 is figure 1.2. So let's just go back and check that, because they're not far back up here, are they? So it was 1 to 76, 1.4, 1.3, 1.2, so 1.2, and if you look, you know, we've got 7, I don't know, all the way up to 59, I guess. Oh no, 62 there. So there is, you know, at the bottom of each page, it's telling you, you know, from 7 to 65, go to figure 0, 1.2, figure 0, 1.2, starts off at 7, goes to 62. So there you go. Hopefully that'll help you go through these circuits. I know the previous ones on the XGS are very, very similar, and I haven't looked at, well, I think the XF, not the XF, the XKR diagram, you know, the circuit diagrams I've got that are very similar. So hopefully that's of use. Let's go back and do some real world stuff in the garage. Basically, by adjusting the module, that module there, so effectively there's a screw here and a screw at this end down there. Effectively by adjusting those, you can adjust where this is. Park's better. Reverse is fine. Neutral. Okay, go all the way back into park. Park's fine. Okay, another job ticked off the list. Looks like it doesn't check for the key in the ignition very often, because if I try it right now, we're not getting the deep thunk from the starter motor. If I get the key, put it inside the exciter ring, turn it off to reset the ECU. So, certainly doing that. We're certainly getting the key security side of things is working. What we need to do now, zoom you in and see what we can see on the so that's basically saying we've got a positive signal on there. See if I can get in there without. Are we getting ignition? Because this is on one of the coils. Hard to say. A lot of noise. Okay, I realised that putting a scope on 2 pins, or one of the pins here, you know, we saw that on the screen, wasn't giving us a very good, you know, representation of whether it is actually firing. However, a good old traditional way of doing it, put the spark plug in here, it's touching the body, so if you look there, as we turn the engine over, you'll see we're getting a spark. At the same time, I have been playing around with this down here. If you look, you can just about see, you know, 143,052 miles. That's what was on the previous car. Like I say, it was a very cheap car. Now, just here you can see that module there. That's the what do you call it? The airbag module. I just wired that in into the back of this. Without that, you don't get this display. It comes up with airbag. It flashes airbag. Well, it flashes airbag, and if you have this wire off as well, which is I'll try that now. Turn it off. Turn it back on again. It should come up. See, it's now coming up with fluid. So that's a brake fluid switch. So I do have one of those, but I don't necessarily need it to be displayed down here, because in the middle of the in between the speedo on the other car, or on the dashboard for the Series 2, there is a brake fluid light there, so, and that's all wired up on the Series 2 car, so there's no point in having this. So all I'll do is make sure that this is actually grounded, so that if you look there, it's actually in that grounding point. It's currently saying, oh, there you go, it's cleared itself. So just, I don't know how, you might just check every so often. There you go, fluid. Connect it back up to ground. Hey presto, we're back to the display. Now really, the only reason, well, not the only reason, but the main reason for having this display showing the horrendous miles, 143,000 instead of about 86 is what the actual car has done. The only reason I want that is I don't have a mechanical drive from the gearbox going to the speedo, so I don't have a milometer. Now I can send a signal from the gearbox, I can send that signal to this display, and then these electronic, interesting, let's see, the even the voltmeter's working. I can send some of those signals to the board that's in this display, and that will drive the little motors. I can take that little module out and put it physically into the mechanical gauge that's from the original car. So I can take the internal working out of the voltmeter, should I wish to do so, and put that in, put this module into the display. So it still looks like the old Smith's instruments, but it's got an electronic inside rather than a mechanical. And the same for the rev counter and the speedo, etc. Well, for all of these, I can do all of them. The only challenge is, I think, the top gauges on the Series 2 are actually like down at the bottom. So the bottom ones point up, with a left to right, and the other ones point down with a left to right. So hopefully, just changing the voltages, the connections around, and putting the display in upside down, it'll work. But I can always get a separate feed from oil temperature, water temperature, etc. I can always get separate ones of those and feed to the traditional displays. The rev counter and the speedo are the two that are a bit more of a challenge, but I'm pretty sure I can get those working. I have tried fitting the this module here, or just the gauge part of it, inside the speedo of the original Series 2 car, and that does work. So we can actually fit them inside. It's just more of a challenge in having to do it. I mean, I've got a spare set, so I can do it, and if it doesn't work, I can go back to the old ones. But basically, to get that display of the mileage, albeit atrocious, there's a circuit board in here. I'm using that to provide all of that information. Now, I'm not 100% certain what else does the temperature gauge come direct. According to the circuit diagram, it comes direct to this module. At the same time, does this module feed that information back to the ECU so it knows what the temperature is? I don't know. I'll have to work that out. But so I've been playing around with this stuff. Pretty certain that the key in the exciter, if it's not in that ring, then you can't start it. So that is a pretty major step forward, really, that it does actually, the ECU and the security control module and the body control module all believe, all being tricked, that they're still in the same car. Anyway, lots more to carry on with.